Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. We'll begin with Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. We learned previously that Rav Huna said that if you have an Asham that's Nitik L'Riyah, that you have a Korban Asham, for instance, the owner, he was Niskaper with a different one. The Asham was lost, and the owner brought a different animal, and he was Makravit, he brought it for the Korban Asham. He had his Kapara, and then they found the original Korban Asham. That Asham has to graze until it gets a mum, and then you use the money for an oila. Rav Huna said that if he shechted it stam, if it was shechted, if that didn't take place, he didn't wait till it got a mum, he shechted it, and without a specific kavona, it's kosher for an oila. So we wanted to bring a rhyme from there. We can see from there that the change of status occurs immediately, automatically. That even if he didn't redesignate it from a asham to an oila, but since it is no longer kosher for an asham, it automatically becomes and it attains the status of an oila. So the change occurs automatically. So on that, the Gemara is now going to ask a kasha. The Mishnah says, in our Mishnah, we learn that if the person shechted the Korban Pesach without realizing that the owners withdrew from the Chabura, so now he shechted it for Shaloi L'Menuya. The Korban Pesach is possible, and therefore it was a shchita with Chil Shabbos. Nevertheless, he's potter. He's Teibat V'Amitz, and he's potter. So we learn over there that Tani Allah B'chol B'cheiki Gavna, if this would occur on a weekday, not on a Shabbos, so the Korban would be possible. It's a possible Korban. He shechted l'shem Korban Pesach and Shaloi L'Menuya is possible. Yisaref miyad. So it's a possible Korban and it's burnt immediately. Now the rule is, as we'll see shortly, that if there's a psul in the Korban itself, so you burn it immediately. You don't wait. But if it's a psul not in the Korban itself, it's a psul in the balim, or it's a psul in the dam, for instance, the shlit was done properly, and the kabbalah sadam, but before they had a chance to do the zrika, the dam spilt out. So it's not in the korban itself. It's just now that they cannot continue to do the avodah. There, you have to wait till the next day. You have to leave it overnight to uber tzura, so you don't burn it immediately. So therefore, if you say that no, the status of the animal, the korban, does not change automatically, you have to do an akira. You have to uproot it from its original status and redesignate it. Then I understand why we say Yisaref Miyad, because this was a Pesach. It's a high Pesach. So it retains its status as a Korban Pesach. It became the Leslie Balim. And since there is no Baalim over here, it's a Korban Pesach that was shechted Shaloi L'Menuya, Havlei Psul B'Gufa, Amtul Nohachi Yisaref Miyad. So therefore, it's a Psul B'Gufa, it's a Psul in the animal itself, that it doesn't have Baalim. This Korban Pesach doesn't have Baalim, and the Korban Pesach that doesn't have Baalim is Pasul. So I understand why it's burned immediately. But if you say you do not need an akira, you don't have to uproot it, that it automatically changes, it reverts to the different status. So therefore, Me'reisha Havlei Shlomim. So when the owners withdrew from the Chabura, so automatically it should switch to a Korban Shlomim. If it's no longer fit, if it's not fit to be Korban Pesach, then it should be a Shlomim. And Psul Mishumai, so why is it possible? Why is it at all possible? The owners withdrew, there's no Baalim, it becomes a Shlomim, so why is it possible at all? Mishum Davar Acher, for an external reason. Why is that? Because it was shechted in the wrong time. The other korbanos have to be shechted before the Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim. The Korban Pesach is after it. Now over here, so it's not a Korban Pesach because the owners withdrew, and therefore it is now a Shlomim. It's shechted in the wrong time, so therefore that is something that's external. It's not in the animal itself. So Ibritzura, boy, it should not be burnt immediately. You should have to wait till the next day where the form changes, it loses its moisture, it dries out, it has Ibur Surah. So why over here does it say you burn it immediately? Because we learned this, and we learned the Braises Klal, Kol Shepsul Begufa Yisaraf Miyat. If it's a psul in the animal itself, in the korban itself, then you burn it right away. Bedam ubebalim, but if the psul is bedam, the dam spilt out, or bebalim, or for instance the korban pesach, that the balim became tome, or they died, so it can't be eaten. There's no one to eat the korban pesach. Then if it's a dam bebalim to barat surosa, it has to be taken, and you have to wait till the next day to burn it, and then after 2 birds are also, then after it's overnight, then you take it to the base of Shreifa to be burnt. So if you tell me, Rav Huna, you were telling me that the designation, it changes immediately. And if it changes immediately, well, if it changes immediately and automatically, then why should it be that you burn it right away? And it's a psul, that's an external psul, you should have to have Ibur Tzorosa. If you tell me that it doesn't change automatically, and therefore it retains its status as a Korban Pesach, so I understand that it's a psul begufa because it's a Korban Pesach, not Balaam. Then I understand why you burn it immediately. But otherwise, if you say that the change is automatic, is a shlomim, it's an external psul. You should need Ibur Tzura. So the Gemara says, now retracts from what we said before. Ein Hanami, that the status does not change automatically. You need an akira. So therefore, in the case of what we mentioned before, that when he said, that Rav said, that if you, that if you shecht it, it's kosher for the oilam, don't say that like we learned beforehand. Don't say like we learned beforehand that it's without an akir that shachta stam, that it's not the way in Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, but rather what Rav meant is that shachta nala loitema shachta stam kosher loila, not that if he shechted it stam without any intention it's kosher loila. No, it's not, because it still retains its status as an ocean, and therefore would not be kosher loila. Ella ema shachta l'shum oila kosher. Rather say that if he shechted it for an oila, he was oiker, he shechted for an oila, then it's kosher. So now if you learn in this way, then it's just the opposite. Alma boy akir. And therefore you say that you do have to uproot it. You do have to be oiker the status. According to Rav Chia Bargam, we said that the Talmidim said unanimously that they said v'amri that the case in the Mishnah on Daf Samir Gimel is talking where the Baal were Tmei Mesim, that they mentioned over there that if a person, after Pesach, he shechted an animal that was designated for a Korban Pesach, and he shechted it stam. Now it's after Pesach, and he shechted it stam, it's possible. Now, let's bring a raya. Why should it be possible? A Pesach after, a Korban Pesach after Pesach, after the Chag, has a designation as a Shlomim. So why should it be possible? It should be kosher for a Shlomim. So l'chara, we have to bring a raya from here that it does not change automatically. That you need an akira. It's not automatically a Shlomim. You have to be aikir. So let's bring a raya from here that you need an akira. But they said, no, it's not a raya because it's talking where the Pesach does not revert to a Shlomim, because it's talking where the owner is during Pesach or Tmei Mesa. So therefore they could not have brought this Korban Pesach. But they are now pushed off to Pesach Sheni. So they could use this as a Korban for Pesach Sheni. So in such a case, it still has validity as a Korban Pesach, can be used for Pesach Sheni. So there, it does not revert automatically to the Shlomim. But I'll tell you that otherwise, a Korban Pesach, which after Pesach, which can no longer be used for Korban Pesach, does revert automatically and become a Shlomim. So over there you see from what he says is that, and it does automatically change where it's no longer kosher for its original designation, it does automatically change. So he says, so hi, who the boy akira. Specifically in this case, you have to do an akira. Hal ba'alma, but otherwise you don't. It changes automatically. What are you going to say? So he does hold, they do hold over there, that it changes automatically. So therefore, how are we going to understand the case of our Mishnah when the owners withdrew from the Chabura? So why do we say over here, when the owners withdrew the Chabura, why do we say that it's burnt immediately? So Ella Amar of Hunabraid of Yeshua. So he says, what are we saying in this case? In this case, that why do we say we burnt it immediately? It's burnt right away. If it's bechol, if it's on a weekday, you burn it immediately. Shabbos, you don't burn psuli korbanos on Shabbos. But if it's bechol, you burn it immediately. Kigain she'efrishu kaim chatzais. We're talking where the animal was designated for Korban Pesach before Chatzos. Now Chatzos comes, so it has to be specifically before Chatzos, because to be Kaveh of the Korban Pesach, it has to be that now Chatzos comes and now designates it as a Korban Pesach. So he set it aside for a Korban Pesach before Chatzos. It comes Chatzos and has a designation for a Korban Pesach. Then the owners died after Chatzos. So the Havalei Nira v'Nidcha. So the animal was Nira, it was Roy, it could have been brought for Korban Pesach, but then it got pushed away because the owners died. Now something that was Nira, that was Roy for the Mizbeach, it got pushed away, it's Dichway, it's Nira v'Nidcha. So once it gets pushed off, and once it becomes disqualified, once it becomes rejected, it remains rejected. It cannot be used anymore. And in this case, it is burnt right away. It's burnt right away, not because we say that an animal will not automatically change the designation. Normally we would say that it should, and it would become a shlomim, and therefore it would not be burnt right away. But here it is burnt right away. Why is that? Because in this case, it can't become a shlomim because it was nir v'nidcha. Once it's nidcha, therefore it becomes disqualified, and therefore it cannot be used as a korban anymore. So it does not become a shlomim. So therefore it's nidcha, and therefore it doesn't become a shlomim, and it's burnt right away. But normally I'll tell you, in other cases where it's not nidcha, there's no dichoy, it's not rejected, then if it now is possible for the original purpose, and if it would revert to a different one, it happens automatically. How can you say that? Miru time el Rab. We're discussing the sheet of Rab. We're discussing the sheet of Rab, who said that by the asham shenidcha, that the asham, that it was going to be used for a oila, that's nitik l'riyah. In that case, we're going according to Rab, and ha'amara balei chayim einu nidochim. Rav says balei chayim, living animals designated as korbanot, don't become nidochim. The dichui is only after the fact, after the shchita, if there was a psul, after that, then you apply the principle of dichui, but not balei chayim. Elamara Pabram said, how do we resolve this brisa with the sheet of Rav? Hamani Rabbi Eliezer is going according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer to Omar. He says, "V'chein sheikh l'cherem l'shem pesach pasul." But not only a korban pesach l'shech l'shloi l'shema is pasul, but if you shecht another korban l'shem pesach, it also becomes pasul. So therefore, over here, the havalei psul begufay, then it's therefore considered a psul begufay, because if you shecht it, even if it reverts to another korban, and you shechted it and reverted to a shlomim, but he shechted it, the one who shechted it didn't know that the owners withdrew. He shechted it for a korban pesach. So if you hold with the shita that you shecht a shlomim for a korban pesach is possible, it becomes possible immediately, and it's a psul begufa, therefore it's burnt immediately. How can you say we're going according to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer, he chatas nami mechayev. Well, in the case of the Mishnah where this occurred on Shabbos, why would it say potter? If the person rather shechted it, not knowing that the owners withdrew from the korban, the Mishnah says he's potter. it's considered Toiv Dvar Mitzvah. But if we're going over here with the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, why would you say that he's potter? He should be Chai v'chatas, chatas not Chai for Chil Shabbos. The Halesli Rabbi Eliezer, Toiv Dvar Mitzvah potter, because Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold Toiv Dvar Mitzvah's potter. So therefore, there should be a Chiyah for Chil Shabbos. There should be a Chiyah v'chatas. Elavai, we cannot say we're going with the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Elatirgma Rav Yosef Breder of Salah Chasida Kamei Rav Papa. He answered as follows: How money? Whose Shita? It's Yosef ben Chunoi. It's going with the Shita of Yosef ben Chunoi. This non Yosef ben Chunoi Omer Hanish Chatim l'Shem Pesach l'Shem Chatas Psulim. If a person shechs l'Shem Pesach, and if it's for the sake of the Korban Chatz or a Chatas apostle, Alma, so therefore Psul B'Gufi. So therefore, he similarly holds that if you shecht another Korban for a Korban Pesach, it's possible. So therefore, even if it automatically becomes a Shlomim, even if automatically when the owners withdrew, that there is a Pesach that doesn't have Baalim, and it therefore becomes a Shlomim, but it's a Shlomim that you shecht for a Pesach, and it's possible. Umishumach Yisarach Miyad, and therefore it's burned right away. Because Alma Psul B'Gufihi, it's a Psul B'Guf, and Mishumach Yisarach Miyad, and therefore you burn it immediately. But Ubeture Savralak Rav Yeshua. But as far as the din of Toiv Dvar Mitzvah, he doesn't hold like Rabbi Eliezer. He holds that Toiv Dvar Mitzvah is potter. So therefore, if this is done on Shabbos, it's Toiv Dvar Mitzvah, and you're potter, there's no chatas. If it's done b'chol, he holds that if you shech, yes, it does automatically become a shlomim. But a shlomim that you shech for a Pesach is a apostle, and it's a psul b'gufa, and therefore you sarf miyad. You burn it immediately. Rav Ashi gives another way of learning that we can reconcile the original understanding with Rav that the change of the korban occurs automatically. Rav Ashi Rav the Amr Kever Shmuel ben Aishel Yachim ben Broikim. He was going with that Shita, the Sani Rav Shmuel ben Aishel Yachim ben Broikim. He says, Im Yeshos Bayayim Leda Imash Kabalim Sidei Moshe Meso Shenitmu. That we said in the Mishnah, that if the person shechted the Korban Pesach, not knowing that the owners withdrew from the Korban Pesach, or that they died or nitma, that we say he's potur, that's only if there was no time to discover the truth. But if there was enough time to determine that in fact that happened, that the owners withdrew or they became Tomer died, then chai. Then he's not considered Toiv Dvar Mitzvah, he's chai. And what's the consequence? Then you have to leave the korban till the next day, and then burn in the basis streifa. So my taima, why is it that you say it's to Uber also? Why don't you say that you burn it immediately? My taima, lav mishum b'loy boy akira. Must be because you don't need an akira. Must be because automatically, when the owner died, became Tomei, or they withdrew, it automatically changes and becomes a Shlomim. It becomes a Shlomim. Now, if it becomes a Shlomim, so what's the Psul? The Psul is not Begufay. The Psul is from something outside. It's because it's shechted after the Tomei Shel Pein Arbaim. And therefore, since it's not a Psul Begufay, it needs Ibr Tzarosa. But if it doesn't change automatically, then it's a psul of a Korban Pesach. It's a psul of a Pesach that doesn't have Bailim. It's a psul b'gufa. You wouldn't need Uber Tzarosa. So doesn't that show you, don't you see from here, that it changes automatically? Where says me mine? What's your proof? Dilma mishum de summer lagotan the Rabbi Baravua. Maybe it's because like him, the Omer who says, I feel pigol nami boy ibur tzura. He holds that even if it is a psul begufa, for instance, like pigol, where it's a psul in the korban itself, that the korban is possible, it's pigol, even then you need ibur tzura, the olaf avin avin minaiser, because he learns exer shava avin avin minaiser. So just like by noiser it's burnt the next day, here also it's burned the next day. And therefore you have no raya, because maybe he would hold that in any event you need ibur tzura, so it doesn't prove that it becomes automatically a shlomim. Diloy temahachi, because if you're not going to say that, nitmu balim ma'ikla meimar, if the case where the balim became tomei, what are you going to say? Now over there, it can't be that it automatically in that case becomes a shlomim. Havadai by akira. In that case, certainly you need an akira. So now one of the cases is that he was not aware that the Balaam withdrew, they later became Tomei. Now in the case of Tomei, it certainly will need Ibud Surah. Over there, it certainly rather needs Akira. Over there, you certainly need Akira. The Amr of Chia Bar Gamda, and this is Pia Chabora, that we all unanimously they agreed. That over there, why do we say that in that case, do we say that it's burnt? And we say that in that case, we say that it's not kosher. If it's shachted after Pesach, why isn't it a shlomim? Because it retains the status of a korban Pesach. It retains the status of a korban Pesach because in the case where the Balaam are Tomei, then they can use that korban for the Pesach Sheni. So certainly in the case of Tuma, you need over there Akira. It certainly won't be automatically a shlomim because it's not a shlomim, because its status as it remains. By the case of Tumah, of the Balaam are Tomei, then we see from what they said over there, what Rav Chia Bar Gamda said, that in a case where the Balaam are Tomei, the korban retains its status as a Pesach because it can be used for Pesach Sheni, and over there it certainly would need Akira. Elamai, so why do we say over here that in this case that you need Ibud Surah? Must be over here that even though it's a psul beguf, he holds you do need an Ibud Surah, because over here in the case of Tuma, it certainly can't be automatically a shlomim, and yet you need Ibud Surah. Must be that he holds that even a psul beguf needs Ibud Surah, so you have no right from the case of Mesu or Mashri Yudayim, you have no right from there either. Elamai, we must say that the brisa that we brought before, the brisa that said that b'chol, if this occurred on chol, and he shechted not knowing that the owners withdrew or become tomei meis, that b'chol yisoref miyad, that you burn it immediately, must be going like Yosef ben Chunoi. It's going like Yosef ben Chunoi. He says that other korbanos that you shecht L'shem Pesach, that if you sech the shlom L'shem Pesach, it's possible. So to reconcile Rav with that, we would say the reason it's Yisaraf Miyad, Ein Chanami, it automatically becomes a shlomim, but a shlomim that we shech for Pesach is possible, as Psul Begufa, it's possible, and therefore it's Yisaraf Miyad. Harulach Elid Vorim, Harulach Elid Vorim, Harulach Elid Vorim. Ketzet Soilem Esa Pesach.